Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we tear through dense, complex source material to give you the fastest route to high-level understanding. If you're looking for a shortcut to expertise, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we are wrestling with one of the most fundamental questions in human
It
existence.
really is.
How do we actually understand anything? I mean, really understand it. We are looking beyond just, collecting facts. We're trying to explore the complex, evolving cognitive architecture, the mental blueprints, really, that shape how we make sense of and interact with our reality.
It's a huge topic.
It is. Our source material for this is a fantastic stack of interdisciplinary research, and it details understanding not as this fixed product, but as a deeply interactive, iterative process. It's all defined by mental models, intricate belief systems, and these clear hierarchies of comprehension. So, our mission today is to extract the core cognitive requirements for sense-making. We are diving deep into the psychology of knowledge acquisition, the functional architecture behind the mind's ability to integrate information, buffer complex data, and constantly predict the future.
And we should probably mention we're deliberately steering clear of the neuroscience, the specific brain mapping.
Exactly. We're focusing purely on the functions and the processes of the mind, not where it happens in the brain tissue, but what is happening. This is the blueprint of thought. Okay, let's unpack this.
You know, what's fascinating here is that the sources immediately challenge the common cultural idea that understanding is a sudden, simple light bulb moment.
Right, that aha moment.
Exactly. If you treat understanding as just an event, you miss its true nature. The core insight from all of this research is that understanding is it's a dynamic, multifaceted, and profoundly iterative cognitive activity. It's constantly under construction.
So it's less like flipping a switch and more like managing a massive continuous construction project.
Precisely. And this project develops over time through four interconnected activities that form a continuous loop. So first, you have learning the raw material. Second, you're interpreting that material in context.
Oh.
Third, you're generalizing the insight to new situations. And then, crucially, the fourth step is acting upon that information. You don't achieve true understanding by just passively reading a report.
Right.
You achieve it by putting that information into practice, testing its limits, and, seeing what breaks.
And the sources are very, very clear that the moments where it does break are probably the most important part of the entire system.
They're critical. Understanding continuously updates and refines your internal mental models based entirely on feedback. So if you try to apply knowledge, if you act upon your current understanding, and it fails, that moment of failure is it's everything.
That's where the learning happens.
That's where the prediction error hits, and it highlights precisely where your cognitive adjustments are needed. That failure isn't a dead end at all. It's the most valuable input this system can possibly receive. It proves this whole process emerges through action and interaction, not just, passive observation.
That emphasis on constant interaction brings us to what the sources call the interactive account of understanding. It's a reminder that this process is profoundly social and very context sensitive. We don't understand things purely in isolation.
Well, you can't. It's impossible. Understanding involves constant interaction with the environment and, maybe more importantly, with other cognitive agents.
Other people.
Other people. Think about any time you've collaboratively solved a problem or negotiated a meeting or even just tried to teach a complex concept. If you and I are negotiating the definition of some new technical term, we engage in what the sources call mutual adjustment.
Right. I say something, you clarify. I realize my internal model was slightly off, and I adjust my framing. We adjust our mental models based on the feedback, the clarifications, the negotiations we receive until we achieve a constructive interaction.
A shared reality.
A sufficiently shared reality to move forward, yeah. It's a continuous low-level loop of just testing and refining our shared conceptual space.
And this constant refinement naturally leads to different qualities of understanding. The sources propose this really distinct hierarchy, moving from basic recognition all the way up to deep mastery. It's a four-level scale that helps us distinguish a simple grasp from true expertise.
Okay, let's start at the bottom then, level 0.
So level 0 is intuitive understanding. This is foundational. It's associative learning derived purely from our earliest experiences. It's that basic, unmediated gut feeling, the immediate recognition of a pattern without any conscious explanation.
Like a toddler knowing a toy will fall if they let go, but having no concept of gravity.
Exactly that. In our modern culture, which, heavily values conscious, verbalized system to thought, this intuitive level is often just dismissed as mere instinct. But the sources argue it forms the essential foundational layer upon which everything else is built. It's that instant pattern recognition that speeds up all of the subsequent processing.
So from there, you move up to mere comprehension, level 1. This sounds more like the standard definition of learning.
It is. It's the facts as is stage. Direct propositional understanding. Level 1 means you're grasping explicit causal links, but within a very narrow context, like objective text comprehension. You map a specific situation to its linguistic semantics in a relatively unbiased way.
So I know what happened and the immediate cause that was presented in the text.
Right. But you haven't yet processed the implication or the comparison or the greater context within your own existing knowledge structure.
Okay, so the moment we start applying those facts in that context, we hit what most people think of as genuine understanding. That's compositional understanding, level 2.
This is where the magic happens. Compositional understanding is where interpretation and framing become really active. You take those level 1 propositional facts and you start to weave them into an explanatory web.
An explanatory web, I like that.
You engage metacognition. You start hypothesizing, criticizing the source, comparing it to other ideas you have. It's an iterative process. You're constantly building these complex causal models. You're moving from knowing the symptoms to understanding the underlying mechanism.
Like moving from knowing the stock market fell, that's level 1, to understanding the whole function mechanism hierarchy of global finance and trade imbalances and regulatory frameworks that explain why it fell. That's level 2.
Exactly. And after repeated successful level 2 construction, we finally graduate to the goal state, which is expert understanding, level 3.
The mastery.
Mastery. Level 3 is the consolidation of all that repeated compositional understanding. It's no longer this effortful working memory processing. It is consolidated into long-term working memory with incredibly refined retrieval cues.
So the expert, when they face a new situation, they get an immediate, intuitive grasp of the big picture.
Right. They circle back to that refined level 0 pattern recognition. They don't have to consciously trace the entire explanatory web. They just see the complex causal model instantly, which makes them incredibly fast and accurate decision makers. That is mastery. The full integration of fact and context into an instantaneous deployable model.
That's a really powerful differentiation. The shift from level 2 to level 3 is the shift from figuring it out to just knowing.
Exactly.
But to even start building these explanatory webs, the mind needs a space to do the construction.
Right. If mastery is the goal, we have to look at the architecture used to build it. And that brings us to the core mechanism of comprehension, the situation model, or what the sources evocatively call the internal matrix.
The matrix, I like it. So this matrix is essentially a highly active mental representation that we are constantly building and refining.
Yes, within working memory. It's the cognitive hub where every piece of information, whether it's linguistic, sensory, conceptual, is brought together. New information isn't just stored in isolation. It has to be integrated with everything we already know.
All our semantic memory, our facts, our episodic memory.
Personal experiences, concepts, schemas. It's the synthesis point that creates a coherent reality for us.
And this must require immense cognitive horsepower just to keep all the pieces connected.
It requires specific, dedicated cognitive functions. The sources really stress the absolute requirement for a mechanism of sense-making and something they call cognitive buffering.
Buffering.
Buffering is crucial. The mind needs to temporarily hold and integrate sensory and cognitive information from multiple modalities at once. What you see, what you hear, what you read, what you feel, to construct a coherent mental representation of complex scenarios.
So without that bustling capacity, our thought would just be disjointed.
Completely. You wouldn't be able to transition smoothly between complex concepts or even understand a long sentence because you'd lose the beginning before you even reach the end. The matrix relies on this capacity to maintain continuity and coherence.
So the ability to build and sustain a coherent situation model depends entirely on integration and buffering capacity. And what drives the need to keep integrating and refining, I assume that leads directly to prediction.
It does. The ultimate goal of the matrix isn't just to describe the present, it's to predict the future. Understanding operates through this relentless cognitive loop known as active inference. This is the core mechanism by which the mind continuously builds, tests, and updates its internal model of the world.
Okay, let's ground this technical term, active inference, in a real-world scenario. How does this loop actually play out minute to minute?
Okay, think about navigating a new, complex subway system. You enter the station, that's your sensory input, and your mind immediately generates predictions. Where should the platform be? Which sign should I look for? Your internal matrix, based on schemas of public transit, predicts how the environment should behave.
Makes sense.
Now, if the sign you expect isn't there or the platform is on the opposite side, that's your prediction error. Your brain minimizes this error by either updating its model, so, okay, this system uses color coding, not direction names, or by taking action to reduce uncertainty.
Active inference in action.
That's it. Looking for a better sign, asking an attendant, consulting a map. This continuous cycle of prediction, error correction, and subsequent action is what leads to the emergence of understanding of that subway system.
It sounds incredibly efficient and adaptive. If I encounter something that completely violates my current model, a genuine surprise, that prediction error forces a fundamental shift in my model of reality.
Precisely. The system is designed for adaptability. If your prediction is wrong, your mind must update its internal model, thereby refining its understanding of the world and making it more adaptable for the future. The ability to minimize prediction error is fundamentally linked to survival and just efficient functioning.
Wait, if the primary goal is minimizing prediction error, this raises a crucial question for you, the listener. How does this mechanism prevent the entrenchment of biases? I mean, if my internal model is already strong, doesn't active inference sometimes just drive me to ignore or reinterpret conflicting information to confirm my existing model rather than challenging it?
That is a brilliant and frankly a necessary critical question. And the source material implicitly acknowledges this trade-off. While the system strives for an objective minimization of error, human cognition is, well, it's complex. If an existing model is deeply entrenched, maybe supported by the strong belief systems we'll discuss in a bit, the mind may sometimes prioritize minimizing prediction error by changing the incoming sensory information.
Or just ignoring it.
Or ignoring it, rather than fundamentally updating the costly internal model. This is essentially the cognitive mechanism behind confirmation bias. True adaptation requires a high level of cognitive flexibility, the willingness to admit the model is fundamentally flawed, which is often a heavy tax on the system.
That makes the construction of the matrix really high stakes. Now, let's tackle the most philosophical part of the sources. If understanding is fundamentally built on these internal models and predictions, this matrix, how real is the understanding we possess? Is there a gap between reality and our comprehension of it?
Well, the source material takes a pretty deep philosophical stance here, suggesting that all thoughts in conscious reality are virtual constructs. Our conscious thinking capacity does not operate on direct external reality. It operates solely on internal representations or qualia within working memory. We are only ever accessing the model, not the object itself.
That's a staggering claim. So, the coherent world we perceive, the objects we interact with, the thoughts we have about them, they're essentially an incredibly sophisticated, stable, and highly functional hallucination built entirely on internal signs.
Functionally, yes. And this virtuality arises from a process drawn from semiotics, specifically Charles Sanders Peirce's concept of semiosis. Semiosis is this triadic process where the constructive cognitive agent, the interpretant, which is you, the conscious observer, subjectively assigns meaning to a sign. And that sign can be an external object or an internal representation.
And that act of assigning meaning happens in what the sources call thirdness or metasence.
Right. Metasence is the medium. It's the field of items in conscious awareness, essentially your working memory and its contents. It's the space where the relationship between the sign and the meaning is constructed.
Oh.
The sources draw a direct, very compelling parallel here to Plato's allegory of the cave. We are, in a way, intellectual prisoners, dealing only with the images or signs projected onto the cave wall. Are internal representations, not the external objects themselves. But since these shadows are all we have to construct meaning, they are the functional reality of our understanding.
Can we break down how that virtuality manifests across Peirce's categories to make them a bit more concrete?
Absolutely. So virtuality in firstness relates to pure phenomenal awareness or feeling. It's unmediated by effort or reason. This shows up in highly subjective, purely internal states like dreams, fantasies, or hallucinations. It's the "it just feels that way" category.
Okay.
The source material notes this can even scale up to collective cultural dreams or mass hallucinations within a social network, where a shared feeling precedes any kind of reasoning.
Then you have virtuality and secondness.
Secondness involves effortful distinction and interaction. This is where you actively distinguish the sign from the object it represents. So examples would be intentionally imagining how to assemble piece of furniture, or the immersive experience of digital virtual reality. You know the VR environment isn't real, but you exert effort and make distinctions within it.
And then the fully cognitive, complex thirdness or metasence.
That is where you find sophisticated cultural constructs that rely heavily on language and shared agreement. Things like narratives, cultural myths, or what the source terms naremes. A nareme is a shared cultural story, like the narrative around a major historical event or a trending social media topic, built entirely on linguistically mediated virtual constructs. The internal matrix uses all three of these levels of virtuality to construct its functional reality.
So the Matrix is a highly sophisticated predictive virtual world. To build this world, the mind needs raw material, the existing structure and organized information it uses to make sense of new signs. What's the scaffolding?
Well, we bring an entire arsenal of foundational knowledge structures to the table. First and foremost, semantic memory. This is our long-term store of abstract concepts, generalized facts, and word meanings. For example, knowing the capital of France or understanding the abstract concept of gravity.
The basics.
Right. And complementing that is episodic memory, our autobiographical record for specific events, when and where they occurred, and what they felt like. The retrieval of these personal past experiences is absolutely integral to sense-making. If you read about a crowded market, you enriched that comprehension with the sensory and emotional context of a specific crowded market you once visited.
So if semantic memory gives us the definition, episodic memory gives us the sensory depth and personal relevance that makes the situation model feel real.
Precisely. And the mind processes incoming information incredibly fast by automatically sorting everything into bins. That's categorization and prototypes. When we see something new, we automatically categorize it. Seeing a specific breed of dog, we instantly access the generalized canine category.
And we use prototypes, right? The most typical examples of a category.
Exactly. They guide our initial understanding and our inferential processes. We infer that a new dog probably barks, based on the prototype of a dog. This automatic sorting dramatically accelerates processing during the early stages of sense-making, and it frees up that cognitive buffering space we talked about.
As the complexity increases, we group knowledge into even larger organized packets that allow for efficient interpretation and, critically, prediction. These are the schemas, scripts, and frames. Let's clearly define their functional differences for the listener.
Okay, let's use a hypothetical. Navigating a new academic environment. Scripts are generalized knowledge structures about common event sequences. The presenting a paper script dictates the expected sequence. Setting up the slides, introducing yourself, speaking for 20 minutes, and then taking questions. It's all about sequential action.
And schemas are broader.
Schemas are more general, organized packets of knowledge about the world, people, or abstract situations. They guide attention and allow for rapid inference about roles and characteristics. So if you activate the academic conference schema, you immediately expect certain roles panelist, moderator, audience member, and certain social behaviors like formal language, intellectual debate. It's about the structure and the relationships within the environment.
And frames.
Frames, however, are structured representations of stereotyped situations, often used to define the boundaries of an interaction. Activating a peer review frame instantly sets the context for constructive criticism, specific criteria for judgment, and a set of expectations about goals. The frame allows for efficient initial processing and context definition for the entire interaction.
So they're all organized knowledge, but they serve different predictive functions, sequence, structure, and context.
Exactly.
These structures are usually defined by our direct experience, but what about highly abstract or shared cultural knowledge?
Even highly abstract units contribute deeply to the situation model. Take memes, defined in the source not just as internet jokes, but as units of cultural information transmitted between individuals. Understanding a complex political meme requires accessing vast shared cultural knowledge, often integrating text, specific images, historical context, to grasp the underlying cultural reference instantly.
Right.
And then you have archetypes, these universal primordial patterns that resonate deeply in human narrative. Recognizing an archetypal pattern, the trickster figure, for instance, leads to a rapid and fundamental framing of context. It provides a basic, almost instantaneous structure for understanding complex narratives and new social situations.
And finally, pulling from the personalized side again, you have instance-based representations.
These are specific, detailed memories of past experiences that are retrieved to inform your understanding of a new, related situation. So if you're assessing a new business proposal, you will retrieve the memory of a specific past proposal that was either highly successful or highly unsuccessful, and you'll bring those detailed outcomes to bear on your current assessment. The function of integration allows us to bind all these multimodal details of that specific past instance into the current understanding of the proposal.
So we have the architecture, the situation model built from schemas, prototypes, and memory. But what fuels the construction? What is the foundational psychological driver that makes us prioritize certain perceptions and decide to act on them?
That driver is belief. Understanding relies fundamentally on our existing belief systems. The sources provide a clinical definition of a belief, which is incredibly clarifying. It is a physiological brain function that stabilizes a perception in light of its value to a given subject.
So it's not just a cognitive choice.
No, it's a neuropsychic product that attributes effective, necessary meaning to concrete objects and events. If you believe the floor is solid, that stabilizes your perception of the floor and allows you to walk without hesitation.
That reframes belief entirely. It's a mechanism for survival and efficient interaction, not just a set of propositions we happen to agree with.
Exactly. Beliefs are essential for individual goal setting, decision-making, and just maneuvering efficiently within the environment. They provide the necessary, stable framework that allows us to understand what we perceive and how we should interact with it. And the sources categorize them based on their complexity, their content, and their mode of formation.
Okay, let's break down these three critical categories of belief.
First, we have empirical beliefs. These are about objects and the basic physical properties of the world, the stability of the ground, the color of the sky, the functionality of a lever. They develop instantaneously, often below the level of awareness, and they're dynamically updated based on sensory input.
So they're constantly being tested.
Constantly. If I push an object and it falls, the belief that it follows the laws of physics is reinforced. The linguistic expression tied to this is to believe that. For example, to believe that the kettle is hot. They're focused on environmental stability.
Then we move to the relational level.
Relational beliefs. These pertain to events, interactions, and relationships, social dynamics, trust between individuals, or the efficient use of tools. These are also instantaneous and often below awareness, and they're dynamically updated as interactions unfold.
Like believing a colleague will deliver on time.
Exactly. For example, the belief that a colleague will deliver their part of a project on time. If they fail, that belief is immediately and dynamically updated, influencing future interaction. The linguistic expression here is to believe someone. To believe my manager is competent. They're focused on social and operational trust.
And the most complex category, the one that really defines human civilization, conceptual beliefs.
Conceptual beliefs are qualitatively different because they fundamentally rely on language, narrative, and social context. They're based on narratives, symbolic systems, and participation in ritual acts. Think of belief in the rule of law, or the value of a currency, or an abstract political ideology.
These require much more sophisticated cognitive processes.
They have to, because they depend on shared symbolic representation and are often maintained collectively, requiring constant social reinforcement. The linguistic expression is to believe in justice. This is the highest level of complexity, and these are the beliefs that bind societies together.
That connection between language, cultural ritual, and high-level belief formation is striking. It ties our entire cognitive engine to our social fabric. Now let's close the loop. How do these beliefs drive action and then refine themselves?
The belief system acts as the intermediary between input and output. So we have perception of objects, events, narratives, and valuation, which is emotions, rituals, affect. Both of these feed directly into the belief system representation, and that stabilizes what we perceive according to its value to us.
And that stable representation then drives the output action and prediction.
Correct. And here's the continuous feedback mechanism. The outcome of that action generates a prediction error or a confirmation. This then feeds back into valuation and learning, constantly adjusting the effective and cognitive weight of the belief system. If your belief in the stability of a system is repeatedly violated, so high prediction error, the system is forced to adjust its valuation of that belief.
And the sources suggest that the very complexity of these beliefs, specifically the need to form conceptual beliefs, is what drove our evolution.
Yes, it's a profound suggestion. The formation of increasingly complex beliefs, the ability to hold and utilize abstract, shared conceptual frameworks, was a fundamental driving force behind the phylogenetic enlargement of the brain, particularly in areas involved in integration and higher-level function.
So our necessity to navigate and negotiate these intricate belief systems is, in this view, what made us uniquely complex thinkers. The complexity of our belief systems drove our cognitive evolution. So understanding isn't just a byproduct of a complex brain. It's the engine that created the complex brain, prioritizing the ability to handle increasingly abstract social and conceptual realities. That's a powerful thought to anchor this next section as we focus in on the component of comprehension itself.
Now that we've established the architecture, the matrix, the beliefs, the predictive loop, let's zoom in on what defines quality, the difference between simple comprehension and deep understanding.
Right, and we need to differentiate three crucial types of understanding that go beyond just simple knowledge.
The foundational level is propositional understanding, which is tied to knowing that a fact is true. And while that's necessary, it's often insufficient. You know the fact, but you haven't grasped its connection to the system it belongs to.
You're stuck at level 1.
You're stuck at level 1. To move past the fact, we seek explanatory understanding. This involves grasping why something happens. It requires insight into causal connections, the reflective accessibility of the reasons behind a phenomenon, and the ability to apply that explanation to new related scenarios. This is understanding the dependencies, the how and why a phenomenon is structured the way it is.
And finally, the highest tier, objectual understanding.
Objectual understanding is the mastery of a subject matter as a whole. It means grasping a vast range of connections, causal, logical, conceptual, that show how different, often disparate parts of a system or body of knowledge fit together. Think of understanding the entire field of economics, not just the function of supply and demand, but how it interacts with sociology, political science, and history.
This distinction is vital because the source material notes that understanding differs from knowledge in some really fundamental ways.
Crucially, first, understanding is gradual. It has breadth, depth, and accuracy, unlike propositional knowledge, which is typically binary. You either know the fact or you don't. Second, understanding involves a set of related beliefs, focusing on the relationships and connections between propositions.
Okay.
And third, and this is where it gets interesting, understanding can tolerate falsehoods, specifically via idealizations.
Wait, if understanding can tolerate falsehoods, how can it lead us to objective reality? That seems like a cognitive vulnerability.
It's actually a cognitive efficiency mechanism. Consider physics. When you model the trajectory of a simple projectile, you often use the model of a frictionless plane, or you assume zero air resistance. That is a falsehood. It's an idealization, but it allows the learner to grasp the core mechanical relationship between force and motion without being overwhelmed by peripheral complexity.
So knowledge demands truth, but understanding demands explanatory power.
Exactly. These idealizations provide that explanatory power, even if they aren't strictly factual. It allows us to build the matrix more quickly and robustly before we then go back and add in the complexity.
That's a brilliant distinction. Understanding is more focused on the coherence of the structure than the absolute truth of every single building block.
Right.
Okay, given that text, whether it's digital or physical, is a massive input for our situation models, let's look at the specific cognitive theories of how we build the matrix from language.
Well, the construction integration model, or CI model, gives us a really reliable two-step view.
Step 1, construction.
The mind takes the text and activates all related knowledge, creating this sprawling, messy network of potential propositions and associations. This is rapid and often includes irrelevant or weak connections.
And then step 2 is integration.
This is the refinement process. The mind strengthens the relevant information, the explicit facts and necessary inferences, while weakening the irrelevant or distracting details. This ultimately forms the coherent text base and, more importantly, the refined situation model.
Then there's the highly automatic process described by the resonance model.
The resonance model argues that comprehension is largely driven by automatic memory retrieval. New information acts as a cue that resonates with existing related knowledge in long-term memory. This similarity causes the relevant concepts to be automatically reactivated and integrated into the situation model without us having to exert, effortful strategic searching.
It's like an instantaneous echo from the past that provides context for the present.
A perfect way to put it. And when we're dealing with narratives, we use the event indexing model. This theory explains that readers, as they progress through a story, continuously track 5 key dimensions to maintain the coherence of their situation model. Time, when did this happen? Space, where are they? Causality, why did this action occur? Intentionality, what are the protagonist's goals? And protagonist, who's performing the action?
So tracking those 5 dimensions is essential for updating the model as the narrative unfolds.
It is. And central to all these models is inference making, which is the mind's way of ensuring the matrix remains gapeless and coherent.
The bridges.
Inferences are the bridges. We generate bridging inferences to connect text parts that are necessary for local coherence. If the text says, John poured water on the fire, it went out, You make the bridging inference that the water caused the fire to go out, even if not explicitly stated. It's necessary.
And then there are elaborative inferences.
Right. These enrich the model with prior knowledge and detail that wasn't strictly necessary for comprehension, but which adds color and context. If the text mentions a jungle, you might elaborate with memories of humidity, specific colors, and sounds.
Finally, to handle really layered meanings like counterfactuals or complex metaphors, we need the sophisticated framework of mental space theory.
Mental space theory explains how our working memory manages complexity without collapsing into confusion. We build mental spaces, which are temporary cognitive structures organized by a specific context. They allow us to manage various frames, hypothetical ideas, or knowledge domains all at the same time.
And what triggers the movement between these spaces?
They are triggered by space builders, which are typically linguistic cues. Words like if, or imagine, or in the future, or I wish, signal the mind to create or shift its focus to a new mental space, where the standard rules of the current situation model may be temporarily suspended. It's what allows for conditional reasoning.
And they don't always stay separate.
Crucially, no. They often blend, taking elements from two or more mental spaces to create a new, emergent meaning. This blending is essential for understanding metaphor, irony, and complex conceptual reasoning. It allows us to navigate interpretations that go far beyond a single, literal, coherent model.
Okay, so we have defined the process as iterative and dynamic, the structure as the situation model or matrix, the driver as belief and active inference, and the mechanisms for filling it all in schemas, inference, comprehension models. Now we take this entire cognitive architecture and we apply it to the most complex, rapidly evolving environment of the 21st century, the digital world.
Absolutely. The internal matrix must incorporate a coherent understanding of the online world, and it builds this understanding through the exact same fundamental processes of meaning-making, integration, and belief formation. Cyberspace is not separate from cognition. It's a sophisticated extension of the mind that mediates the self, reality, and social others.
And the virtual nature of reality that we discussed earlier becomes immediately relevant here, given that cyberspace is, by definition, a virtual construct built on digital signs.
Precisely. The construction of meaning online is still reliant on semiosis assigning meaning to signs, whether those signs are text, images, virtual objects, or deepfakes. To navigate this, the sources reference Siller's 8 Dimensions of Cyberpsychology, which provide a fantastic framework for assessing how the internal matrix expands to incorporate the online experience.
Let's run through them.
Okay, the first dimension is identity. This focuses on the sense of self, how we present ourselves online, and the relationship between our established offline self and our chosen online persona.
This has profound implications for understanding. If I only ever interact with someone's carefully curated online identity, my situation model of them is based on a sign that may only reflect a fractional or idealized truth.
Exactly. It raises the question of individuation. Does the online environment allow for a healthier, more individuated self, or does it fragment the matrix into competing identities that cause cognitive dissonance? The internal matrix has to integrate all these identities into a single, functional understanding of self.
Okay, what's next?
Second is the social dimension, addressing interpersonal aspects. This includes the speed and nature of relationship formation online, from simple chat interactions to online romance, and the difficulty of maintaining relational beliefs when nonverbal cues are missing. We're forced to rely more heavily on conceptual beliefs about others.
Third, the interactive dimension. This deals with human-computer interaction, UX design, and crucially, persuasive technology.
This one is critical because the design of the interface actively influences how the mind builds its situation model. The way an app is designed, the friction points, the reward loops, is actively trying to minimize your prediction error by guiding your behavior. Understanding this dimension is key to understanding how our matrix is being subtly manipulated by technology.
Number 4.
Fourth is the text dimension. Online communication has unique characteristics: the use of abbreviations, emojis, the inherent lack of nonverbal cues. This lack of richness forces the mind to work harder, generating more elaborative and bridging inferences to achieve coherence, placing a greater strain on that cognitive buffering capacity.
Fifth is the sensory dimension, covering everything non-textual. The psychological effects of visual design, immersive environments, specific audio cues, or haptic feedback.
Right. These non-textual inputs feed directly into the firstness and secondness of semiosis, pure feeling and an effortful distinction, and they're instantly integrated into the situation model, influencing mood and cognitive state before high-level comprehension even kicks in.
Sixth is the reality dimension. And the sources personally flag this as the most important dimension for our modern understanding.
They do, and for good reason. This dimension explores the fluid boundaries between fantasy and reality online. Since we established that all thought is virtual, the boundary between the virtual reality created by our conscious thought and the virtual reality of a digital environment, like the metaverse or a game, becomes permeable.
That's a huge deal.
The psychological effects of this distinction are immense.
Ah.
How does the matrix process, for example, deepfakes? If the predictive loop is presented with highly convincing sensory data that contradicts a strongly held relational or empirical belief, the prediction error generated can destabilize the matrix fundamentally. This dimension governs how our conceptual beliefs about truth and reality hold up in an age of seamless digital signs.
Seventh, the temporal dimension. This examines how cyberspace affects our experience of time, which impacts our scripts and our event tracking.
Synchronous communication like video chat maintains a clear, immediate temporal script, reducing prediction error. But asynchronous communication like email or social media posts fractures the temporal script. It forces the matrix to manage information that is delivered across a nonlinear timeline, changing how we track the event indexing model's time variable.
And finally, the eighth, the physical dimension.
This addresses the integration or detachment from the physical environment. Think of augmented reality or devices controlled by bodily movement. The internal matrix must learn to integrate digital signs directly onto physical reality, or conversely, detach itself when fully immersed. The cognitive buffering capacity is severely tested when merging these realities, demanding highly efficient sense-making to avoid sensory and conceptual overload.
That brings us to the end of our deep dive. What we've ultimately established is that understanding is not a passive event, but a highly complex, constructive, and iterative process. It's driven by continuous prediction and error correction, what we call active inference, and it's built upon a layered foundation of empirical, relational, and conceptual belief systems.
And the entire cognitive structure relies on the constant high-level integration of existing knowledge structures, schemas, scripts, and episodic memories into a comprehensive internal matrix or situation model. And the cognitive function of buffering and sense-making is essential for achieving that coherence across different forms of input, whether those inputs are facts, feelings, or virtual interactions.
And the practical value for you, the listener, is realizing that true understanding is about grasping relationships, explanatory and objectual understanding, not just accumulating propositional facts. It requires continuous, active engagement, reflection, and the willingness to accept prediction error as a necessary catalyst for growth. So, what does this all mean? We discussed how the source material strongly posits that the increasing capacity to form more complex beliefs, specifically intricate conceptual beliefs, was a fundamental driving force behind the phylogenetic enlargement of the brain. Our cognitive complexity evolved to accommodate our belief complexity. So if our ability to sustain shared, abstract, and complex belief systems drove our physical evolution, and if those beliefs are constantly being refined through active inference and interaction across Seuler's 8 dimensions of cyberspace, where virtual reality and physical reality are merging, what limits the current complexity of conceptual beliefs we can collectively form right now? What new, perhaps entirely digital, more complex belief types might our cognitive matrix evolve to accommodate next as the lines between truth, sign, and virtual experience continue to blur? We leave that thought for you to explore.